We are in Chapter 6 at page 263 on the bottom. It took Yellen a week to get his enforcers together in sufficient number, although together with an adequate brute squad, and so 5 days before the wedding he stood at the head of his company, awaiting the speech of the prince. This was in the castle courtyard, and when the prince appeared, the count was, as usual, with him, although not as usual, the count seemed preoccupied, which of course he was, though Yellen had no way of knowing that. The count had sucked 10 years from Wesley this past week, and with the life of a 65 that was average for a Florinese male, the victim had approximately 30 years remaining, assuming he was about 25 when they started experimenting. But how best to go about dividing that? The count was simply in a quandary. So many possibilities, but which would prove scientifically most interesting? The count sighed. Life was never easy. "You are here," the prince began, "because there may be another plot against my beloved. I charge each and every one of you with being her personal protector. I want the thieves' quarter empty and all the inhabitants jailed 24 hours before my wedding. Only then will I rest easy. Gentlemen, I beg you, think of this mission as being an affair of the heart, and I know you will not fail." With that, he pivoted and, followed by the count, hurried from the courtyard, leaving Yellen in command. The conquest of the thieves' quarter began immediately. Yellen worked long and hard at it each day, but the thieves' quarter was a mile square, so there was much to do. Most of the criminals had been through unjust and illegal roundups before, so they offered little resistance. They knew the jails were not celled enough for all of them, so if it meant a few days' incarceration, what did it matter? There was, however, a second group of criminals, those who realized that capture meant, for various past performances, death, and these, without exception, resisted. In general, Yellen thought adroit handling of the brute squad was able to bring these bad fellows eventually under control. Still, 36 hours before the sunset wedding, there were half a dozen holdouts left in the thieves' quarter. Yellen arose at dawn and tired and confused. Not one of the captured criminals seemed to come from Gilder. He gathered the best of the brute squad and led them into the thieves' quarter for what simply had to be the final foray. Yellen went immediately to Falkbridge's alehouse, first sending all save 2 brutes off on various tasks, keeping a noisy one and a quiet one for his own needs. He knocked on Falkbridge's door and waited. Falkbridge was by far the most powerful man in the thieves' quarter. He seemed almost to own half of it, and there wasn't a crime of any dimension he wasn't behind. He always avoided arrest, and everyone except Yellen thought Falkbridge must be bribing somebody. Yellen knew he was bribing somebody, since every month, rain or shine, Falkbridge came to Yellen's house and gave him a satchel full of money. "Who?" Falkbridge called from inside the alehouse. "The chief of all enforcement in Florin, accompanied by brutes," Yellen replied. Completeness was one of his virtues. "Oh!" Falkbridge opened the door. For a power, he was very unimposing, short, chubby. "Come in!" Yellen entered, leaving the 2 brutes in the doorway. "Get ready and be quick," Yellen said. "Hey, Yellen, it's me," Falkbridge said softly. I know, Yellen said softly right back. "But please, do me a favor, get ready." "Pretend I did. I'll stay in the alehouse, I promise. I got enough food, no one will ever know." "The prince is without mercy," Yellen said. "If I let you stay and I'm found out, that's it for me." "I've been paying you 20 years to stay out of jail. You're a rich man just so I don't have to go to jail. Where's the logic of me paying you and no advantages?" "I'll make it up to you. I'll get you the best cell in Florin City. Don't you trust me?" "How can I trust a man I pay 20 years to stay out of jail when all of a sudden the minute a little extra pressure's on, he says, 'Go to jail'? I'm not going." "You!" Yellen signaled to the noisy one. The brute started running forward. "Put this man in the wagon immediately," Yellen said. Falkbridge was starting to explain when the noisy one clubbed him across the neck. "Not so hard," Yellen cried. The noisy one, picked up by Falkbridge, tried dusting his clothes. "Is he alive yet?" Yellen asked. "See, I didn't know you wanted him breathing in the wagon. I thought you only wanted him in the wagon breathing, or not, so—" "Enough!" Yellen interrupted, and upset, he hurried out of the alehouse, while the noisy one brought Falkbridge. "Is that everyone, then?" Yellen asked as various brutes were visible leaving the thieves' quarter, pulling various wagons. "I think there's still the fencer with the brandy," the noisy one began. "See, they tried getting him out yesterday, but I can't be bothered with a drunk. I'm an important man. Get him out of here and do it now, both of you. Take the wagon with you and be quick. The quarter must be locked and deserted by sundown, or the prince will be mad at me, and I don't like it much when the prince is mad at me." We're going," the noisy one replied, and he hurried off, letting the quiet one bring the wagon with Falkbridge inside. They tried getting this fencer yesterday, some of the standard enforcers, but it seems he has certain sword skills that made them weary. "But I think I have a trick that will work." The quiet one hurried along behind, dragging the wagon. They rounded a corner, and from around another corner came up ahead a kind of drunken mumbling that was starting to get louder. I'm getting very bored, Vizzini, came from out of sight. 3 months is a long time to wait, especially for a passionate Spaniard. Much louder now. And I am very passionate, Vizzini, and you are nothing but a tardy Sicilian. So if you're not here in 90 more days, I'm done with you. You hear? Done. Much softer now. I didn't mean that, Vizzini. I just love my filthy stoop. Take your time. The noisy brute slowed. That kind of talk goes on all day. Ignore it and keep the wagon out of sight. The quiet one pushed the wagon almost to the corner and stopped it. Stay with the wagon, the noisy one added, and then whispered, Here comes my trick. And with that, he walked alone around the corner and stared ahead at the skinny fellow sitting, clutching the brandy bottle on the stoop. Ho there, friend, the noisy one said. I'm not moving. Keep your ho there, said the brandy drinker. Hear me through, please. I've been sent by Prince Humperdinck himself, who is in need of entertainment. Tomorrow is our country's 500th anniversary, and the dozen greats, tumblers, and fencers and entertainers are at this very moment competing. The finest pair will compete personally tomorrow for the new bride and groom. Now, as to why I'm here, yesterday some of my friends tried rousing you, and they said later that you resisted with some splendid sword work. So if you'd like, I, at great personal sacrifice, will rush you to the fencing contest, where, if you're as good as I'm told, you might have the honor of entertaining the royal couple tomorrow. You think you would win such a competition? Breezing. Then hurry while there's still time to enter. The Spaniard managed to stand. He unearthed his sword and flashed it a few times across the morning. The noisy one took a few quick steps backwards and said, No time to waste. Come along now. Then the drunk started yelling, I'm waiting for Vizzini. Meanie. I'm not mean. I'm just following the rule. Cruel. Not cruel. Not mean. Can't you understand? And here his voice trailed off for a moment as he squinted. Then quietly he said, Fezzik? From behind the noisy one, the quiet one said, Who says it? Inigo took a step from his stoop, trying desperately to make his eyes focus through the brandy. Sezek? Is that a joke you made? The quiet one said, Played. Inigo gave a cry and started staggering forward. Fezzik, it's you! True. And he reached out and grabbed Inigo just before he stumbled, brought him back to an upright position. Hold him just like that, the noisy brute said, and he moved in quickly, right arm raised as he had done to Falkbridge. Splat! Fezzik dumped the noisy brute into the wagon beside Falkbridge, covered them both with a soiled blanket, then hurried back to Inigo, whom he had left leaning propped up against a building. It's just so good to see you, Fezzik said then. Oh, it is, but Inigo's voice was winding steadily down. I'm too weak for surprises, were the last sounds he got out before he fainted from fatigue and brandy and no food and bad sleep and lots of other things, none of them nutritious. I'm going to skip this part. What's happening now is Fezzik is going to get Inigo sober. So he's going to feed him and let him rest and put his face in hot water and cold water. He's going to tell him that the Count and the Prince have the man in black somewhere, and that the princess, he's going to tell him everything that's going on. And then Inigo's going to pass out again. Anyway, he's going to tell him everything that's going on. So go to page 274. And we're going to be where he says, Inigo said, pacing faster now. If you fought 5 and I fenced 5, that would mean 10 gone, which would be bad because he would also mean 10 left and they would kill us. But, oh wait, so they're devising a plan to get into the castle because he knows that somehow Fezzik knows that Count Rugen is the 6-fingered man. So they're trying to plan how to get into the castle now. Because Inigo wants to kill Count Rugen. But Inigo and Fezzik together can't make up a plan. That's what they're trying to do right now. Okay, so we're on 274. Well, some of them are from the Brute Squad, so I don't think more than 8, leaving me 12, which is not impossible. But the best way to spend your first evening after 3 months on brandy. And suddenly Inigo's body sagged, and in his eyes, bright a moment ago, now there was moisture. What has happened? Fezzik cried. Oh, my friend, I need Vizzini. I am not a planner. I follow. Tell me what to do, and no man alive does it better. But my mind is like fine wine, it travels badly. I go from thought to thought, but not with logic, and I forget things. And tell me, Fezzik, what am I to do? Fezzik wanted to cry now, too. I'm the stupidest fellow that was ever born, you know that. I couldn't remember to come back here even after you made up that special lovely rhyme for me. I mean Vizzini. But Vizzini is dead. And then Inigo was up again, blazing about the kitchen, and for the first time his fingers were snapping with excitement. I don't need Vizzini. I need his master. I need the man in black. Look, he bested me with steel, my greatness. He bested you with strength, yours. He must have outplanned and outthought Vizzini, and he will tell me how to break through the castle and kill the six-fingered beast. If you have the least notion where the man in black is at this moment, relate, quickly, the answer. He sails the seven seas with the dread pirate Roberts. Why would he do a thing like that? Because he is a sailor for the dread pirate Roberts. A sailor? A common ordinary seaman, best the great Inigo Montoya with the sword. Inconceivable! He must be the dread pirate Roberts, otherwise it makes no sense. In any event, he is sailing far away. Count Rugen says so, and the prince himself gave the order. The prince wants no pirates around. What with all the trouble he is having with Gilder, remember they kidnapped the princess once, they might try. Fezzik, we kidnapped the princess once. You never were strong in memory, but even you should recall that we put the Gilder uniform pieces under the princess's saddle. Vizzini did it because he was under orders to do it. Someone wanted Gilder to look guilty, and who but a noble would want that? And what noble more than the war-loving prince himself? We never knew who hired Vizzini. I guess Humperdinck. And as for the Count's word on the man in black's whereabouts, since the Count is the same man who slaughtered my father, we can rest assured that he is certainly a terrific fellow. He started for the door. Come, we have much to do. Fezzik followed him through the darkening streets of the thieves' quarter. You'll explain things to me as we go along? Fezzik asked. I'll explain them to you now. His blade-like body knifed on through the quiet streets, Fezzik hurrying alongside. A, I need to reach Count Rugen, at last avenge my father. B, I cannot plan on how to reach Count Rugen. C, Vizzini could have planned it for me, but C prime Vizzini is unavailable. However, D, the man in black outplanned Vizzini, so therefore E, the man in black can get me to Count Rugen. But I told you, Prince Humperdinck, after he captured him, gave orders for all to hear that the man in black was to be returned safely to his ship. Everyone in Florin knows this to be so. A, Prince Humperdinck has some plans to kill his fiancée and hired us to carry them out. B, the man in black ruined Prince Humperdinck's plans. However, eventually C, Prince Humperdinck managed to capture the man in black. And everybody in all Florin City knows Prince Humperdinck has a terrible temper. And so therefore D, if a man has a terrible temper, what could be more fun than losing it against the very fellow who spoiled your plans to kill your fiancée? They had reached the thieves' quarter wall now. Inigo jumped on Fezzik's shoulders, and Fezzik started to climb. Conclusion 1. Inigo continued, not missing a beat. Since the prince is in Florin City, taking out his temper on the man in black, and the man in black must also be in Florin City. Conclusion 2. The man in black must not be too happy with the present situation. Conclusion 3. I am in Florin City and need a planner to avenge my father, where he is in Florin City and needs a rescuer to salvage his future. And when people have equal needs of each other, conclusion 4 and final, deals are made. Fezzik reached the top of the wall and started carefully climbing down the other side. I understand everything, he said. You'll understand nothing, but it really doesn't matter, since what you mean is you're glad to see me just as I'm glad to see you, because no more loneliness. That's what I mean, said Fezzik. It was dusk when they began their search blindly through all of Florin City, dusk a day before the wedding. Count Rugen was about to begin his nightly experiments at that dusk, gathering up his notebooks from his room, filled with all his jottings. 5 levels underground, behind high castle walls, locked and chained and silent, Wesley waited beside the machine. In a way, he still looked like Wesley, except of course that he had been broken. 20 years of his life had been sucked away. 20 were left. Pain was anticipation. Soon the Count would come again. Against any wishes he had left, Wesley went on crying. It was dusk when Buttercup went to see the prince. She knocked loudly, waited, knocked again. She could hear him shouting inside, and if it had not been so important, she never would have knocked the 3rd time. But she did, and the door was yanked open, and the look of anger on his face immediately changed to the sweetest smile. Beloved, he said, come in. A moment more is all I need. And he turned back to Yellen. Look at her, Yellen, my bride-to-be. Has any man ever been so blessed? Yellen shook his head. Am I wrong, do you think, to go to any lengths, then, to protect her? Yellen shook his head again. The prince was driving him crazy with all his stories of the Gilder infiltration. Yellen had every spy he'd ever used working day and night, and not one of them had come up with anything about Gilder. And yet the prince insisted. Inwardly, Yellen sighed. It was beyond him. It was simply an enforcer, not a prince. In fact, the only remotely disturbing news he'd heard since he closed the thieves' quarter that morning was within the hour, when someone told him of a rumor that the ship of the dread pirate Roberts had perhaps been sailing all the way into Florin Channel itself. But such a thing, Yellen knew from long experience, was simply rumor. "I'll tell you they are everywhere, these Guilders," the prince went on, "and since you seem unable to stop them, I wish to change some plans. All the gates have been sealed to my castle except the front one, yes? Yes, and 20 men guard it. Add 80 more. I want 100 men, clear? 100 men it will be, every brute available. Inside the castle I'm quite safe. I have my own supplies, food, stables, enough. As long as they cannot get at me, I will survive. These, then, are the new and final plans. Jot them down. All 500th anniversary arrangements are cancelled until after the wedding. The wedding is tomorrow at sunset. My bride and I will ride my whites to Florin Channel, surrounded by all your enforcers. There we will board a ship and begin our long-awaited honeymoon, surrounded by every ship in the Florin Armada." "Every ship but 4, Buttercup corrected. He blinked at her a moment in silence. Then he said, blowing her a kiss, but discreetly so Yellen couldn't see, Yes, how forgetful I am, every ship but 4. He turned back to Yellen, but in his blink, in that following silence, Buttercup had seen it all. "Those ships will stay with us until I deem it safe to release them. Of course, Gilder could attack then, but that is a chance we must risk. Let me think if there's anything else." The prince loved giving orders, especially the kind he knew would never need carrying out. Also, Yellen was a slow jotter, and that only added to the fun. "Excused," the prince said finally. With a bow, Yellen was gone. "The 4 ships were never sent," Buttercup said, when they were alone. "Don't bother lying to me any more." "Whatever was done for your own good, sweet pudding." "Somehow I do not think so." "You're nervous. I'm nervous. We're getting married tomorrow. We've got a right to be." "You couldn't be more wrong, you know. I'm very calm." And in truth, she did seem that way. "It doesn't matter whether you sent the ships or not. Wesley will come for me. There is a God, I know that. And there is love, I know that too. So Wesley will save me." "You're a silly girl. Now go to your room." "Yes, I am a silly girl. And yes, again, I will go to my room." "And you are a coward, with a heart filled with nothing but fear." The prince had to laugh. "The greatest hunter in the world, and you say I am a coward?" I do indeed. I'm getting much smarter as I age. I say you are a coward, and you are. I think you hunt only to reassure yourself that you are not what you are, the weakest thing to ever walk the earth. You will come for me, and then we will be gone, and you will be helpless for all your hunting, because Wesley and I are joined by the bond of love, and you cannot track that, not with 1,000 bloodhounds, and you cannot break it, not with 1,000 swords. Stop there. Turn the page. Page 283, where it says Humperdinck. Humperdinck screamed toward her, then ripping at her autumn hair, yanking her from her feet and down the long curving corridor to her room, where he tore that door open and threw her inside and locked her there and started running for the underground entrance to the Zoo of Death. And down he plunged, giant stride after giant stride. And when he threw the door of the 5th level cage open, even Count Rugen was startled at the purity of whatever the emotion was that reflected in the prince's eyes. The prince moved to Wesley. "She loves you," the prince cried. "She loves you still, and you love her, so think of that. Think of this, too. In all the world, you might have been happy, genuinely happy. Not one couple in a century has that chance, not really, no matter what the storybooks say. But you could have had it, and so I would think no one will ever suffer a loss as great as you." And with that, he grabbed the dial and pushed it all the way forward, and the count cried, "Not to 20!" But by then, it was too late. The death scream had started. It was much worse than the scream of the wild dog. In the first place, the dial for the wild dog had only been set at 6, whereas this was more than triple that. And so naturally enough, it was more than 3 times as long, and more than 3 times as loud. But none of this was why it was worse. It was the scream from a human throat that made the difference. In her chamber, Buttercup heard it, and it frightened her, but she had not the least idea what it was. By the main door of the castle, Yellen heard it, and it also frightened him, though he couldn't imagine what it was either. All the 100 brutes and fighters flanked by the main door heard it too, and to a man they were bothered by it, and they talked over it for quite a while, but none of them had any sound notions as to what it might have been. The great square was filled with common people excited about the coming wedding and anniversary, and they all heard it too, and no one even made the pretense of not being scared. But again, none of them knew at all what it might have been. The death scream rose higher in the night. All the streets leading to the square were also filled with citizens, all trying to crowd into the square, and they heard it, but once they admitted they were petrified, they gave up trying to guess what it might have been. Inigo knew immediately. In the tiny alley that he and Fezzik were trying to force their way through, he stopped, remembering. The alley led to the streets that led to the square, and the alley was jammed too. "I don't like that sound," Fezzik said, his skin at the moment cold. Inigo grabbed the giant, and the words began pouring out. Fezzik! Fezzik! That is the sound of ultimate suffering! I know that sound! That was the sound in my heart when Count Rugen slaughtered my father and I saw him fall. The man in black makes it now. You think that's him? Who else has cause for ultimate suffering this celebration night? And with that, he started to follow the sound. But the crowds were in his way, and he was strong, but he was thin, and he cried, Fezzik! Fezzik, we must track that sound. We must trace it to its source. And I cannot move, so you must lead me. Fly, Fezzik. This is Inigo, begging you. Make a path, please. Well, Fezzik had rarely had anyone beg him for anything, least of all Inigo. And when something like that happened, you did what you could. So Fezzik, without waiting, began to push. Forward. Lots of people. Fezzik pushed harder. Lots of people began to move. Out of Fezzik's way, fast. The death scream was starting to fade now, fading in the clouds. Fezzik, said Inigo, all your power, now! Down the alley, Fezzik ran, people screaming and diving to get out of his way, and in his footsteps, Inigo kept pace. And at the end of the alley was a street, and the scream was fainter now. But Fezzik turned left, and into the middle of the street he went, and he owned it. No one was in his way. Nothing dared block his way, and the scream was getting just so hard to hear. So with all his might, Fezzik roared, Quiet! And the street was suddenly hushed, and Fezzik pounded along. Inigo right behind, and the scream was still there, still faintly there, and into the great square itself and the castle beyond before the scream was gone. Wesley lay dead by the machine. The prince kept the dial at the 20 mark long after it was necessary, until the count said, Done. The prince left without another look at Wesley. He took the secret underground stairs 4 at a time. She actually called me a coward, he said, and then he was gone from sight. Count Rugen started taking notes. Then he threw his quill pen down. He tested Wesley briefly, then he shook his head. Death was not of any intellectual interest to him at all. When you were dead, you couldn't react to pain. The count said, Dispose of the body, because even though he couldn't see the albino, he knew the albino was there. It was really a shame, he realized as he mounted the stairs after the prince. You just didn't come across victims like Wesley every day of the year. When they were gone, the albino came out, pulled the cups from the corpse, decided to burn the body on the garbage pyre back behind the castle, which meant a wheelbarrow. He hurried up the underground stairs and came out the secret entrance, moved quickly to the main tool shed. All the wheelbarrows were buried back at the rear wall behind the hoes and rakes and hedge trimmers. The albino made a hissing sound of displeasure and began to pick his way past all the other equipment. This kind of thing always seemed to happen to him when he was in a hurry. The albino hissed again. Extra work, all the time. Wouldn't you just know it? He finally got the barrow out and was just passing the false and deadly supposed maid entrance to the zoo when, I'm having the devil's own trouble tracking that scream was spoken to him. And the albino whirled around, and there in the castle grounds, a blade-thin stranger with a sword in his hand. The sword suddenly flicked its way to the albino's throat. Where's the man in black? The swordsman said then. He had a giant scar slanting down each cheek and seemed like no one to trifle with. Whispered, I know no man in black. Did the scream come from that place? The fellow indicated the main entrance. Nod. And the throat it came from. I need this man, so be quick. Wesley. Inigo reasoned. A sailor. Brought here by Rugen? Nod. And I reach him where? The albino hesitated, then pointed to the deadly entrance. Whispered, He's on the bottom level, 5 levels down. Then I have no more need for you. Quiet him a while, Fezzik. From behind him, the albino was aware of a giant shadow moving. Funny, he thought. The last thing he remembered, I thought that was a tree. Inigo was on fire now. There was no stopping him. Fezzik hesitated by the main door. Why would he tell the truth? He's a zookeeper, threatened with death. Why would he lie? That doesn't follow. I don't care, Inigo said sharply, and in fact he didn't. He knew in his heart the man in black was down there. There was no other reason for Fezzik to find him, for Fezzik to know of Rugen, for everything to be coming together after so many years of waiting. If there was a God, then there was a man in black waiting. Inigo knew that. He knew it. And of course, he was absolutely right. But again, of course, there were many things he did not know. That the man in black was dead, for one, that the entrance they were taking was the wrong one for another, false one, a setup to foil those like himself who did not belong. There were spitting cobras down there, though what would actually come at him would be worse. These things he did not know either, but his father had to be revenged, and the man in black would figure out how. That was enough for Inigo. And so with an urgency that would soon turn into deep regret, he and Fezzik approached the Zoo of Death. Chapter 7, The Wedding. Inigo allowed Fezzik to open the door, not because he wished to hide behind the giant's strength, but rather because the giant's strength was crucial to their entering. Someone would have to force the thick door from its hinges, and that was right up Fezzik's alley. It's open, Fezzik said, simply turning the knob, peering inside. Open? Inigo hesitated. Close it then. There must be something wrong. Why would something as valuable as the prince's private zoo be left unlocked? It smells of animals, something awful in there, Fezzik said. Did I get a whiff? Let me think, Inigo said. I'll figure it out. And he tried to do his best, but it made no sense. You didn't leave diamonds lying around on the breakfast table, and you kept the Zoo of Death shut and bolted. So there had to be a reason. It was just a matter of exercising your brain, and the answer would be there. The answer to why the door happened to be unlocked was really this. It was always unlocked. And the reason for that was really this, safety. No one who had entered via the front door had ever survived to exit again. The idea basically belonged to Count Rugen, who helped the prince architect the plan. The place. The prince selected the location, the farthest corner of the castle grounds, away from everything, so the roars wouldn't bother the servants, but the count designed the entrance. The real entrance was by a giant tree, where a root lifted and revealed a staircase, and down you went until you arrived at the 5th level. The false entrance, called the real entrance, took you down the levels of the ordinary way, first to second, second to third, or actually, second to death. Yes, Inigo said finally. You figured it out? The reason the door was unlocked is simply this. The albino would have locked it. He would never have been so stupid as not to, but, Fezzik, my friend, we got to him before he got to it. Clearly, once he was done with his wheelbarrowing, he would have begun locking and bolting. It's quite all right. You can stop worrying. Let's go. I just feel so safe with you, Fezzik said, and he pulled the door open a second time. As he did it, he noticed that not only was the door unlocked, it didn't even have a place for a lock. And he wondered, should he mention that to Inigo, but decided against it because Inigo would have to wait and figure some more. And they had done enough of that already because although he said he felt safe with Inigo, in truth, he was very frightened. He had heard odd things about this place, and lions didn't bother him, and who cared about gorillas? They were nothing. It was the creepers that made him squeamish, and the slitherers, and the stingers, and the everything. Fezzik decided to be truthful and honest. Spiders and snakes and bugs and bats, you name it, he just wasn't very fond of any of them. Still smells of animals, he said, and he held the door open for Inigo. And together, stride for stride, they entered the Zoo of Death, the great door shutting silently behind them. Quite the bizarre place, Inigo said, moving past several large cages in which there were cheetahs, hummingbirds, and other swift things. At the end of the hall, there was another door with a sign above it saying, to level 2. They opened that door and saw a flight of stairs leading very steeply down. Careful, Inigo said. Stay close to me and watch your balance. They started down toward the 2nd level. If I tell you something, will you promise not to laugh at me or mock me or be mean to me? Fezzik asked. My word, Inigo nodded. I'm just scared to pieces, Fezzik said. Be sure it ceases, Inigo said right back. Oh, that's a wonderful rhyme. Some other time, Inigo said, making another, feeling quite bright about the whole thing, sensing the pleasure in having Fezzik visibly relax as they descended. So he smiled and clapped Fezzik on his great shoulder for the good fellow he was. But deep, deep inside, Inigo's stomach was nodding. He was absolutely appalled and astonished that a man of unlimited strength and power would be scared to pieces. Until Fezzik spoke, Inigo was positive that he was the only one who was genuinely scared to pieces. And the fact that they both were did not bode well if panic time came. Someone would have to keep his wits, and he had assumed automatically that since Fezzik had so few, he would find retaining them not all that difficult. No good, Inigo realized. Well, he would simply have to do his best to avoid panic situations, and that was that. The staircase was straight and very long, but eventually they reached the end of it. Another door, Fezzik gave it a push. It opened. Another corridor lined with cages, big ones though, and inside great baying hippos, and a 20-foot alligator thrashing angrily in shallow water. We must hurry, Inigo said, picking up the pace, much as we might like to dawdle, and he half ran toward a sign that said to level 3. Inigo opened the door and looked down, and Fezzik peered over his shoulder. Inigo said, the staircase was different. It was not nearly as steep, and it curved halfway, so whatever was near the bottom of it was quite out of sight as they stood at the top preparing to go down. There were strange candles burning high on the walls, out of reach. The shadows they made were long and very thin. Well, I'm certainly glad I wasn't brought up here, Inigo said, trying for a joke. Fear, Fezzik said, the rhyme out before he could stop it. Inigo exploded. Really, if you can't maintain control, I'm going to send you right back up, and you can just wait there all by yourself. Don't leave me. Don't make me leave you, please. I meant to say beer. I don't know how the F got in there. I'm really losing patience with you. Come along, Inigo said, and he started down the curving stairs, Fezzik following, and as the door closed behind them, 2 things happened. 1, the door quite clearly locked. 2, out went the candles on the high walls. Don't be frightened, Inigo screamed. I'm not, Fezzik screamed right back. And then, above his heartbeat, he managed, What are we going to do? Simple, said Inigo after a while. Are you frightened too? Asked Fezzik in the darkness. Not remotely, Inigo said with great care. Before I meant to say easy. I don't know how the s got in there. Look, we can't go back, and we certainly don't want to stay here, so we just must keep on going as we were. These little things happened. Down. Down is our direction, Fezzik. But I can tell you're a bit edgy about all this, so out of the goodness of my heart, I will let you walk down, not behind me, not in front of me, but right next to me, on the same step, stride for stride. And you put an arm around my shoulder, because that will probably make you feel better. And I, so as not to make you feel foolish, will put an arm around your shoulder. And thus, safe, protected, together, we will descend. Will you draw your sword with your free hand? I already have. Will you make a fist with yours? It's clenched. Then let's look on the bright side. We're having an adventure, Fezzik, and most people live and die without being as lucky as we are. They moved down one step, then another, then two, then three, as they got the hang of it. Why do you think they locked the door behind us? Fezzik asked as they moved. To add spice to our trip, I suspect, replied Inigo. It was certainly one of his weaker answers, but the best he could come up with. Here's where the turn starts, said Fezzik, and they slowed, making the sharp turn without stumbling, continuing on down. And they took away the candles for the same reason? Spice? Most likely. Don't squeeze me so hard. Don't you squeeze me quite so hard. By then they knew they were for it. There has been for many years a running battle among jungle zoologists as to just which of the giant snakes is the biggest. The anaconda men are forever trumpeting that the Orinoco specimen that weighed well over 500 pounds, while the python people never fail to reply by pointing out that the African rock found outside Zambezi measured 34 feet 7 inches. The argument, of course, is silly because biggest is a vague word, having no value whatever in arguments if one is serious. But any serious snake enthusiast would admit, whatever his schooling, that the Arabian Garstini, though shorter than the python and lighter than the anaconda, was quicker and more ravenous than either. And this specimen of Prince Humperdinck's was not only remarkable for its speed and agility, it was also kept in permanent state of just verging on the outskirts of starvation. So the first coil came like lightning as it dropped from above them and pinioned their hands to the fist and sword were useless. And the second coil imprisoned their arms and, "Do something!" Inigo cried. "I can't. I'm caught. You do something." "Fight it, Fezzik!" "It's too strong for me." "Nothing is too strong for you." The third coil was done now, around the upper shoulders, and the fourth coil, the final coil, involved the throat, and Inigo whispered in terror because he could hear the beast breathing now, could actually feel its breath. "Fight it! I'm... Fezzik trembled with fear and whispered, "Forgive me, Inigo." "Oh, Fezzik! Fezzik!" "What?" "I had such rhymes for you." "What rhymes?" Silence. The fourth coil was finished. "Inigo, what rhymes?" Silence. Snake breath. "Inigo, I want to know the rhymes before I die. Inigo, I really want to know. Inigo, tell me the rhymes," Fezzik said, and by now he was very frustrated, and more than that, he was spectacularly angry, and one arm came clear of the one coil, and that made it a bit less of a chore to fight free of the second coil, and that meant he could take that arm, bring it to the aid of the other arm, and now he was yelling it out. "You're not going anywhere until I know those rhymes!" And the sound of his own voice was really very impressive, deep and resonant. And who was the snake anyway, getting in the path of Fezzik when there were rhymes to learn? And by this time, not only were both arms free of the bottom three coils, but he was furious at the interruption, and his hands grabbed toward the snake breath. And he didn't know if snakes had necks or not, but whatever it was that you called that part that was under its mouth, that was the part he had between his great hands, and he gave it a smash against the wall, and the snake hissed and spit, but the fourth coil was looser. So Fezzik smashed it again, and a third time, and then he brought his hands back a bit for leverage, and he began to whip the beast against the walls like a native washerman beating a skirt against rocks. And when the snake was dead, Inigo said, "Actually, I had no specific rhymes in mind. I just had to do something to get you into action." Fezzik was panting terribly from his labors. "You lied to me, is what you're saying? My only friend in all my life turns out to be a liar?" He started tromping down the stairs, Inigo stumbling after him. Fezzik reached the door at the bottom and threw it open and slammed it, with Inigo just managing to slip inside before the door crashed shut. It locked immediately. At the very end of this corridor, the to level 4 sign was clearly visible, and Fezzik hurried toward it. Inigo pursued him, hurrying past the poisoners, the spitting cobras, and the gaboon vipers, and perhaps most quickly lethal of all, the lovely tropical stonefish from the outside of India. "I apologize," Inigo said. "One lie in all these years. That's not such a terrible average when you consider it saved our lives." "There's such a thing as principle," was all Fezzik would answer, and he opened the door that led to the 4th level. My father made me promise never to lie, and not once in my life have I ever been tempted. And he started down the stairs. Stop, Inigo said. At least examine where we're going. It was a straight staircase, but completely dark. The opening at the far end was invisible. It can't be as bad as where we've been, Fezzik snapped, and down he went. In a way, he was right. For Inigo, bats were never the ultimate nightmare. Oh, he was afraid of them, like everybody else, and he would run and scream if they came near. In his mind, though, hell was not bat-infested. But Fezzik was a Turkish boy, and people claim the fruit bat from Indonesia is the biggest in the world. Try telling that to a Turk sometime. Try telling that to anyone who has heard his mother scream, "Here come the king bats!" followed by the poisonous flutter of wings. "Here come the king bats!" Fezzik screamed, and he was, quite literally, as he stood halfway down the dark steps, paralyzed with fear. And behind him now, doing his best to fight the darkness, came Inigo. And he had never heard that tone before, not from Fezzik. And Inigo didn't want bats in his hair either, but it wasn't worth that kind of fright. So he started to say, What's so terrible about king bats? But what was all he had time for before Fezzik cried, "Rabies! Rabies!" And that was all Inigo needed to know. And he yelled, "Down, Fezzik!" And Fezzik still couldn't move, so Inigo felt for him in the darkness as the fluttering grew louder. And with all his strength, he slammed the giant on the shoulders, hollering, "Down!" And this time Fezzik went to his knees, obediently. But that wasn't enough, not nearly. So Inigo slammed him again, crying, "Flat! Flat! All the way down!" Until Fezzik lay on the black stairs, shaking, and Inigo knelt above him, the great six-fingered sword flying into his hands. And this was it. This was a test to see how far down the 90 days of brandy had taken him. How much of the great Inigo Montoya remained. For yes, he had studied fencing. True, he had spent half of his life and more learning the Agrippa attack and the Bonetti defense. And of course, he had studied his Taibot. But he had also, one desperate time, spent a summer with the only Scot who ever understood swords, the crippled Macpherson. And it was Macpherson who scoffed at everything Inigo knew. It was Macpherson who said, Taibot is fine if you fight in a ballroom, but what if you meet your enemy on terrain that is tilted, and you are below him?" And for a week, Inigo studied all the moves from below. And then Macpherson put him on a hill in the upper position. And when those moves were mastered, Macpherson kept right on. For he was a cripple. His legs stopped at the knee. And so he had a special feel for adversity. "And what if your enemy blinds you?" Miss Macpherson once said. "He throws acid in your eye, and now he drives in for the kill. What do you do? Tell me that, Spaniard! Survive that, Spaniard!" And now, waiting for the charge of the king bats, Inigo flung his mind back toward the Macpherson moves. And you had to depend on your ears. So you found his heart from his sounds. And now as he waited, above him, Inigo could feel the king bats massing, while below him, Fezzik trembled like a kitten in cold water. "Be still," Inigo commanded. And that was the last sound he made, because he needed his ears now. And he tilted his head toward the flutter, the great sword firm in his right hand, the deadly point circling slowly in the air. Inigo had never seen a king bat, knew nothing of them. How fast were they? How did they come at you? At what angle? How many at each charge? The flutter was dead above him now, 10 feet perhaps more. And could bats see in the night? Did they have that weapon too? "Come on," Inigo was about to say, but there was no need, because with a rush of wings he had expected and a high, long shriek he had not, the first king bat swooped down at him. Inigo waited. The flutter was off to the left, and that was wrong, because he knew where he was, and so did the beasts. So that meant they must have been preparing something for him, a cut, a sudden turn. And with all control left to his brain, he kept his sword just as it was, circling slowly, not following the sound until the fluttering stopped, and the king bat veered in silence toward Inigo's face. The six-fingered sword drove through like butter. The death sound of the king bat was close to human, only a bit higher pitched and shorter, and Inigo was only briefly interested because now there was a double flutter. They were coming at him from two sides, one right, one left. Macpherson told him always move from strength to weakness, so Inigo stabbed first to the right, then drove to the left, and two more almost human sounds came and went. The sword was heavy now. 3 dead bats changed the balance, and Inigo wanted to clear the weapon, but now another flutter, a single one. And no veering this time, straight and deadly for his face, and he ducked and he was lucky. The sword moved up and into the heart of the lethal thing, and now there were 4 skewered on the sword of legend. And Inigo knew he was not about to lose this fight, and from his throat came the words, "I am Inigo Montoya, and still the wizard. Come for me!" And when he heard 3 of them fluttering, he wished he had been just a bit more modest, but it was too late for that, so he needed surprise. And he took it, shifting position against the beast, standing straight, taking their dives long before they expected it. And now there were 7 king bats, and his sword was completely out of balance. And that would have been a bad thing, a dangerous thing, except for one important aspect. There was silence now in the darkness. The fluttering was done. Some giants you are, Inigo said then, and he stepped over Fezzik and hurried down the rest of the darkened stairs. Fezzik got up and lumbered after him, saying, Inigo, listen, I made a mistake before. You didn't lie to me, you tricked me, and my father always said tricking was fine. So I'm not mad at you anymore. And is that all right with you? It's all right with me. They turned the knob on the door at the bottom of the black stairs and stepped onto the 4th level. Inigo looked at him. You'll forgive me for completely saving your life if I completely forgive you for saving mine? You're my friend, my only one. Pathetic. That's what we are, Inigo said. Athletic. That's very good, Inigo said, so Fezzik knew they were fine again. They started toward the sign that said, to level 5, passing strange cages. This is the worst yet, Inigo said, and then he jumped back because behind a pale glass case, a blood eagle was actually eating what looked like an arm. And on the other side, there was a great black pool, and whatever it was dark and many-armed, and the water seemed to get sucked toward the center of the pool where the mouth of the thing was. Hurry, Inigo said, and he found himself trembling at the thought of being dropped into the black pool. They opened the door and looked down the 5th level. Stunning. In the first place, the door they opened had no lock, so it could not trap them. And in the second place, the stairs were all brightly lit. And in the third place, the stairs were absolutely straight. And in the fourth place, it wasn't a long flight at all. And in the main place, there was nothing inside. It was bright and clean and totally, without the least doubt, empty. I don't believe it for a minute, Inigo said, and holding his sword at the ready, he took the first step down. Stay by the door. The candles will go out any second. And he took a second step down. The candles stayed bright. A third step, the 4th. There were only about a dozen steps in all, and he took 2 more, stopping in the middle. Each step was perhaps a foot in width, and he was 6 feet from Fezzik, 6 feet from the large, ornate, green-handled door that opened onto the final level. Fezzik, from the upper door. What? I'm frightened. It looks all right, though. No, it's supposed to. That's to fool us. Whatever we've gotten by before, this must be worse. But there's nothing to see, Inigo. Inigo nodded. That's why I'm so frightened. He took another step down toward the final ornate green-handled door. Another. 4 steps to go. 4 feet to go. 48 inches from death. Inigo took another step. He was trembling now, almost out of control. Why are you shaking? Fezzik from the top. Death is here. Death is here. He took another step down. 24 inches to dying. Can I come join you now? Inigo shook his head. No point in your dying too, but it's empty. No. Death is here. Now he was out of control. If I could see it, I could fight it. Fezzik didn't know what to do. I'm Inigo Montoya, the wizard. Come for me! He turned around, sword ready, studying the brightly lit staircase. Now you're scaring me, Fezzik said, and he let the door close behind him and started down the stairs. Inigo started up after him, saying, No! They met on the 6th step, 72 inches from death now. The green speckled recluse doesn't destroy as quickly as the stonefish, and many think the mamba brings more suffering, what with the ulcerating and all. But gram for gram, nothing in the universe comes close to the green speckled recluse. Among other spiders, compared with the green speckled recluse, the Black Widow was a rag doll. Prince Humperdinck's recluse lived behind the ornate green handle on the bottom door. She rarely moved unless the handle turned. Then she struck like lightning. On the 6th stair, Fezzik put his arm around Inigo's shoulder. We'll go down together, step by step. There's nothing here, Inigo. To the 5th step. There has to be. Why? Because the prince is a fiend, and Rugen is his twin in misery. And this is their masterpiece. They moved to the 4th step. It's wonderful thinking, Inigo, Fezzik said, loud and calmly. But inside he was starting to go to pieces, because here he was, in this nice bright place. And his one friend in all the world was cracking from the strain. And if you were Fezzik and you hadn't much brain power, and you found yourself 4 stories underground in a zoo of death looking for a man in black that you really didn't think was down there, and the only friend you had in all the world was going quickly mad, what did you do? 3 steps now. If you were Fezzik, you panicked, because if Inigo went mad, that meant the leader of this whole expedition was you. And if you were Fezzik, you knew the last thing in the world you could ever be was a leader. So Fezzik did what he always did in a panic situation. He bolted. He just yelled and jumped for the door and slammed it open with his body, never even bothering with the niceties of turning that pretty green handle. And as the door gave behind his strength, he kept right on running until he came to the giant cage, and there, inside and still, lay the man in black. Fezzik stopped then, relieved greatly, because seeing that silent body meant one thing. Inigo was right. And if Inigo was right, he couldn't be crazy. And if he wasn't crazy, then Fezzik didn't have to lead anybody anywhere. And when that thought reached his brain, Fezzik smiled. Inigo, for his part, was startled at Fezzik's strange behavior. He saw no reason for it whatsoever, and was about to call after Fezzik when he saw a tiny green speckled spider scurrying down from the door handle, so he stepped on it with his boot as he hurried to the cage. Fezzik was already inside the place, kneeling over the body. "Don't say it," Inigo said, entering. Fezzik tried not to, but it was on his face. "Dead." Inigo examined the body. He had seen a lot of corpses in his time. Dead. Then he sat down miserably on the floor and put his arms around his knees and rocked back and forth like a baby. Back and forth, and back. It was too unfair. You expected unfairness if you breathed, but this went beyond that. He, Inigo, no thinker, had thought. Hadn't he found the man in black? He, Inigo, frightened of beasts and crawlers and anything that stung, had brought them down the zoo unharmed. He had said goodbye to caution and stretched himself far beyond any boundaries he ever dreamed he possessed. And now, after such effort, after being reunited with Fezzik on this day of days for this one purpose, to find the man to help him find a plan to help him revenge his dead Domingo, gone. All was gone. Hope, gone. Future, gone. All the driving forces of his life, gone. Snuffed out, beaten, dead. "I am Inigo Montoya, the son of Domingo Montoya, and I do not accept it." He sprang to his feet, started up the underground stairs, stopping only long enough to snap commands. Come along, bring the body." He searched through his pockets for a moment, but they were empty from the brandy. "Have you got any money, Fezzik?" "Some. They pay well on the brute squad." "Well, I just hope it's enough to buy a miracle, that's all." When the knocking started on his hut door, Max almost didn't answer it. "Go away," he almost said, because lately it was only kids come to mock him. Except this was a little past the time for kids being up. It was almost midnight, and besides, the knocking was both loud and, at the same time, rat-a-tatty, as if the brain was saying to the fist, "Hurry it up, I want to see a little action." So Max opened the door a peek's worth. I don't know you." "Aren't you Miracle Max, that worked all those years for the king?" the skinny guy said. "I got fired, didn't you hear? It's a painful subject. You shouldn't have brought it up. Good night. Next time, learn a little manners." And he closed the hut door. Rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat. "Get away, I'm telling you, or I'll call the brute squad." "I'm on the brute squad," this other voice said from outside the door. A big, deep voice you wanted to stay friendly with. "We need a miracle. It's very important," the skinny guy said from outside. "I'm retired," Max said. "Anyway, you wouldn't want someone the king got rid of, would you? I might kill whoever you want me to miracle." "He's already dead," the skinny guy said. "He is, huh?" Max said, a little interest in his voice now. He opened the door a peek's worth again. "I'm good at dead." "Please," the skinny guy said. "Bring him in. I'm making no promises," Miracle Max answered after some thought. This huge guy and the skinny guy brought in this big guy and put him on the hut floor. Max poked the corpse. "Not so stiff as some," he said. The skinny guy said, "We have money." "Then go get some great genius specialist, why don't you? Why waste time messing around with me, a guy who the king fired?" It almost killed him when it happened. For the first 2 years, he wished it had. His teeth fell out from the gnashing. He pulled the few loyal tufts from his scalp in wild anger. "You're the only miracle man left in Florin," the skinny guy said. "Oh, so that's why you come to me." One of you said, "What do we do with this corpse?" And the other one said, "Let's take a flyer on that miracle man the king fired." And the first one probably said, "What do we got to lose? He can't kill a corpse." And the other one probably said, "You were a wonderful miracle man," the skinny guy said. "It was all politics that got you fired." "Don't insult me and say wonderful. I was great. I am great. There was never, you hear me, Sonny, a miracle man could match me. Half the miracle techniques I invented, and then they fired me." Suddenly his voice trailed off. He was very old and weak, and the effort of a passionate speech had drained him. "Sit, please, sit down," the skinny guy said. "Don't sir me, Sonny," Miracle Max said. He was tough when he was young, and he was still tough. "I got work to do. I was feeding my witch when you came in. I got to go finish that now." And he lifted the hut trap door and took the ladder down into the cellar, locking the trap door behind him. When that was done, he put his finger to his lips and ran to the old woman cooking hot chocolate over the coals. Max had married Valerie back a million years ago, it seemed like, at Miracle School, where she worked as a potion ladler. She wasn't, of course, a witch, but when Max started practice, every miracle man had to have one. So, since Valerie didn't mind, he called her a witch in public, and she learned enough of the witch trade to pass herself off as one under pressure. "Listen, listen," Max whispered, gesturing repeatedly toward the hut above. "Upstairs, you'll never guess what I got. A giant and a stick." "A giant on a stick?" Valerie said, clutching her heart. Her hearing wasn't what it once was. "Spick! Spick! A Spanish fella! Scars and everything. A very tough cookie." "Let them steal what they want. What do we have worth fighting over?" "They don't want to steal. They want to buy. Me. They got a corpse up there. They want a miracle." You were always good at Dad, Valerie said. She hadn't seen him trying so hard not to seem excited since the firing had all but done him in. She very carefully kept her own excitement under control. If only he would work again. Her Max was such a genius. They'd all come back, every patient. Max would be honored again, and they could move out of the hut. In the old days, the hut was where they tried experiments. Now it was home. You had nothing else pressing on for the evening. Why not take the case? I could. I admit it, no question. But suppose I did. You know, human nature. They probably try getting out without pay. How can I force a giant to pay if he doesn't want to? Who needs that kind of grief? I'll send them on their way, and you bring me up a nice cup of chocolate. Besides, I was halfway through an article on Eagle's Claws that was very well written. Get the money in advance. Go. Demand. If they say no, out with them. If they say yes, bring the money down to me. I'll feed it to the frog. They'll never find it, even if they change their mind and try to rob it back. Max started back up the ladder. What should I ask it for? I haven't done a miracle. It's been, 3 years now? Prices may have skyrocketed. 50, you think? If they got 50, I'll consider it. If not, out they go. Right, Valerie agreed. And the minute Max had shut the trap door, she clambered silently up the ladder and pressed her ear to the ceiling. Sir, we're in a terrible rush, so, this one voice said, don't you hurry me, Sonny. Hurry a miracle man, you get rotten miracles. That what you want? You'll do it then. I didn't say I'd do it, Sonny. Don't try pressuring a miracle man. Not this one. You try pressuring me, out you go. How much money you got? Give me your money, Fezzik, the same voice said. Here's all I've got, this great voice boomed. You count it, Inigo. There was a pause. 65 is what we've got, the one called Inigo said. Valerie was about to clap her hands with joy when Max said, I never worked for anything that little in my life. You got to be joking. Excuse me again. I got to belch my witch. She's done eating by now. Valerie hurried back to the coals and waited until Max joined her. No good, he said. They only got 20. Valerie stirred away at the stove. She knew the truth, but dreaded having to say it, so she tried another tack. We're practically out of chocolate powder. 20 could sure be a help at the barterers tomorrow. No chocolate powder, Max said, visibly upset. Chocolate was one of his favorites, right after cough drops. Maybe if it was a good cause, you could lower yourself to work for 20, Valerie said. Find out what they need, why they need the miracle. They'll probably lie. Use a bellows cram if you're in doubt. Look, I would hate to have it on my conscience if we didn't do a miracle when nice people were involved. You're a pushy lady, Max said, but he went back upstairs. Okay, he said to the skinny guy. What's so special I should bring back out of all the hundreds of people pestering me every day for my miracles, this particular fella? And believe me, it better be worthwhile. Inigo was about to say so he could tell me how to kill Count Rugen, but that didn't quite sound like the kind of thing that would strike a cranky miracle man as aiding the general betterment of mankind. So he said, he's got a wife. He's got 15 kids. They have a shred of food. If he stays dead, they'll starve, so... Ah, Sonny, are you a liar, Max said, and he went to the corner and got out a huge bellows. I'll ask him, Max grunted, lifting the bellows towards Wesley. He's a corpse. He can't talk, Inigo said. We got our ways, was all Max would answer, and he stuck the huge bellows way down into Wesley's throat and started to pump. You see, Max explained as he pumped, there's different kinds of dead. There's sort of dead, mostly dead, and all dead. This fella here, he's only sort of dead, which means there's still a memory inside. There's still bits of brain. You apply a little pressure here, a little more there. Sometimes you get results. Wesley was beginning to swell slightly now from all the pumping. What are you doing? Fezzik said, starting to get upset. Never mind, I'm just filling his lungs. I guarantee you it ain't hurting him. He stopped pumping the bellows after a few moments more, and then started shouting into Wesley's ear. What's so important? What's here worth coming back for? What you got waiting for you? Max carried the bellows back to the corner and got out a pen and paper. It takes a while for that to work its way out, so you might as well answer me some questions. How well do you know this guy? Inigo didn't much want to answer that, since it might have sounded strange admitting they'd only met once alive, and then to duel to the death. How do you mean exactly? He replied. Well, for example, Max said, was he ticklish or not? Ticklish, Inigo exploded angrily. Ticklish! Life and death are around you, and you talk ticklish? Don't you yell at me, Max exploded right back. And don't you mock my methods. Tickling can be terrific in the proper instances. I had a corpse once worse than this fella, mostly dead he was, and I tickled him and tickled him, and I tickled his toes, I tickled his armpits, his ribs, and I got a peacock feather and went after his belly button. I worked all day and I worked all night, and the following dawn, mark me, this corpse said, I just hate that. And I said, hate what? And he said, being tickled. I come all the way back from the dead to ask you to stop. And I said, you mean that this that I'm doing now, the peacock feather, it bothers you? And he said, You couldn't guess how much it bothers me. And of course, I just kept on asking him questions about tickling, making him talk back to me, answer me, because I don't have to tell you, once you got a corpse really caught up in conversation, your battle's half over. True love. Fezzik grabbed onto Inigo in panic, and they both pivoted, staring at the man in black, who was silent again. True love, he said. And Inigo cried. You heard him. True love is what he wants to come back for. That's certainly worthwhile. Sonny, don't you tell me that's worthwhile. True love is the best thing in the world, except for cough drops. Everybody knows that. Then you'll save him, Fezzik said. Yes, absolutely. I would have saved him if he had said true love, but you misheard. Whereas I, being an expert on the bellows cram, will tell you what any qualified tongue man will only be happy to verify, namely that the F sound is the hardest for the corpse to master, and that it therefore comes out with va, and what your friend said was to blove, by which he meant obviously to bluff. Clearly he is either involved in a shady business deal or a card game and wishes to win. That is certainly not reason enough for a miracle. I'm sorry, I never change my mind once it's made up. Goodbye. Take your corpse with you. Liar! Liar! Shrieked suddenly from the now open trapdoor. Miracle Max whirled. Back, witch! He commanded. I'm not a witch, I'm your wife! She was advancing on him now, an ancient, tiny fury. And after what you've done, I don't think I want to be that anymore! Miracle Max tried to calm her, but she was having none of it. He said true love, Max. Even I could hear it. True love! True love! Don't go on, Max said, and now there was pleading coming from him somewhere. Valerie turned toward Inigo. He is rejecting you because he is afraid. He is afraid he's done, that the miracles are gone from his once majestic fingers. Not true, Max said. You're right, Valerie agreed. It isn't true. They never were majestic. Max, you were never any good. The ticklish cure. You were there. You saw. A fluke. All the drowners I returned. Chance. Valerie, we've been married 80 years. How can you do this to me? Because true love is expiring and you haven't got the decency to tell why you don't help. Well, I do, and I say this. Prince Humperdinck was right to fire you. Don't say that name in my hut, Valerie. You made a pledge to me you'd never breathe that name. Prince Humperdinck, Prince Humperdinck, Prince Humperdinck. At least he knows a phony when he sees one. Max fled toward the trapdoor, his hands going to his ears. But this is his fiancée's true love, Inigo said then. If you bring him back to life, he will stop Prince Humperdinck's marriage. Max's hands left his ears. The corpse here? He comes back to life. Prince Humperdinck suffers. Humiliations galore, Inigo said. Now that's what I call a worthwhile reason, Miracle Max said. Give me the 65. I'm on the case. He knelt beside Wesley. He said. What? Valerie said. She knew that tone. While you were doing all that talking, he slipped from sort of dead to mostly dead. Valerie tapped Wesley in a couple places. Stiffening, she said. You'll have to work around that. Max did a few taps himself. Do you suppose the oracle's still up? Valerie looked at the clock. I don't think so. It's almost 1. Besides, I don't trust her all that much anymore. Max nodded. I know, but it would have been so nice to have a little advance hint on whether this is going to work or not. He rubbed his eyes. I'm tired going in. I wish I'd known in advance about the job. I'd have napped this afternoon. He shrugged. Can't be helped. Down is down. Get me my encyclopedia of spells and the hex appendix. I thought you knew all about this kind of thing, Inigo said, starting to get upset himself now. I'm out of practice. Retired. It's been 3 years. You can't mess around with these resurrection recipes. One little ingredient wrong, the whole thing blows up in your face. Here's the hex book in your glasses, Valerie puffed, coming up the basement ladder. As Max began thumbing through, she turned to Inigo and Fezzik, who were hovering. You can help, she said. Anything, Fezzik said. Tell us whatever's useful. How long do we have for the miracle, if we work it? When we work it, Max said from his hex book. His voice was growing stronger. When we work it, Valerie went on. How long does it have to maintain full efficiency? Just exactly what's going to be done. Well, that's hard to predict, Inigo said, since the first thing we have to do is storm the castle, and you can never be really sure how those things work out. An hour pill should be about right, Valerie said. Either it's going to be plenty or you'll both be dead, so why not say an hour? We'll all 3 be fighting, Inigo corrected. And then once we've stormed the castle, we have to stop the wedding, steal the princess, and make our escape, allowing space somewhere in there for me to duel Count Rugen. Visibly, Valerie's energy drained. She sat wearily down. Max, she said, tapping his shoulder. No good. He looked up. Huh? They need a fighting corpse. Max shut the hex book. No good, he said. But I bought the miracle, Inigo insisted. I paid you 65. Look here, Valerie thumped Wesley's chest. Nothing. You ever hear anything so hollow? The man's life's been sucked away. It'll take months before there's strength again. We haven't got months. It's after 1 now and the wedding's at 6 tonight. What parts can we hope to have in working order in 17 hours? Well, Max said, considering, certainly the tongue, absolutely the brain, and with luck, maybe a little slow walk if you nudge him gently in the right direction. Inigo looked at Fezzik in despair. What can I tell you? Max said. You needed a fast phantasmagoria. And you never could have gotten one of those for 65, Valerie added consolingly. We're going to skip this part. It just talks about how Fezzik and Inigo have to go and collect materials from different places. One thing you want to remember is that Fezzik grabs a Holocaust cloak. Holocaust meaning fire, death by fire, not the event that happened during World War II in Europe. So a Holocaust cloak you put around you and it keeps you from catching on fire. So we're on page 321 now. You mean that's it? Inigo said, appalled. That's it, Max nodded proudly. He had not been up this long a stretch since the old days, and he felt terrific. Valerie was so proud. Beautiful, she said. She turned to Inigo then. You sound so disappointed. What did you think a resurrection pill looked like? Not a lump of clay the size of a golf ball, Inigo answered. Skip the italics. I usually give them a coating of chocolate at the last minute. It makes them look a lot better, Valerie said. It must be 4 o'clock, Max said then. Better get the chocolate ready so it'll have time to harden. Valerie took the lump with her hand and started down the ladder to the kitchen. You never did a better job. Smile. It'll work without a hitch, Inigo said. Max nodded very firmly, but he did not smile. There was something in the back of his mind bothering him. He never forgot things, not important things, and he didn't forget this either. He just didn't remember it in time. At 4:45, Prince Humperdinck summoned Yellen to his chambers. Yellen came immediately, though he dreaded what he knew about to happen. As a matter of fact, Yellen already had his resignation written in an envelope in his pocket. Your Highness, Yellen began. Report, Prince Humperdinck said. He was dressed brilliantly in white, his wedding costume. He still looked like a mighty barrel, but brighter. All your wishes have been carried out, Highness. Personally, I have attended to each detail. He was very tired, Yellen was, and his nerves long past frayed. Specify, said the prince. He was 75 minutes away from his first female murder, and he wondered if he could get his fingers to her throat before even the start of a scream. He had been practicing on giant sausages all the afternoon and had the movements down pretty pat, but then giant sausages weren't necks, and all the wishing in the world wouldn't make them so. All passages to the castle itself have been resealed this very morning, save the main gate. That is now the only way in and the only way out. I have changed the lock to the main gate. There is only one key to the new lock, and I keep it wherever I am. When I am outside with the 100 troops, the key is on the outside lock, and no one can leave the castle from the inside. When I am with you, as I am now, the key is on the inside lock, and no one may enter from the outside. Follow, said the prince, and he moved to the large window of his chamber. He pointed outside. Below the window was a lovely planted garden. Beyond that, the prince's private stables. Beyond that, naturally, the outside castle wall. That is how they will come, he said. Over the wall, through my stables, past my garden, to my window, throttle the queen, and back the way they came before we know it. They, Yellen said, though he knew the answer. The Guelderians, of course. But the wall where you suggest is the highest wall surrounding all of Florian Castle. It is 50 feet high at that point, so that would seem the least likely point of attack. He was trying desperately to keep himself under control. All the more reason why they should choose that spot. Besides, the world knows that the Guelderians are unsurpassed as climbers. Yellen had never heard that. He had always thought the Swiss were the ones who were the unsurpassed as climbers. Highness, he said in one last attempt, I have not yet from a single spy heard a single word about a single plot against the princess. I have it on unimpeachable authority that there will be an attempt made to strangle the princess this very night. In that case, Yellen said, and he dropped to his one knee and held out the envelope. I must resign. It was a difficult decision. The Yellens had headed enforcement in Florian for generations, and they took their work more than seriously. I'm not doing a capable job, sire. Please forgive me and believe me when I say that my failures were those of the body and mind and not of the heart. Prince Humperdinck found himself quite suddenly in a genuine pickle. For once the war was finished, he needed someone to stay in Guilder and run it, since he couldn't be in two places at once, and the only men he trusted were Yellen and the Count. And the Count would never take the job, being obsessed as he was these days with finishing his stupid pain primer. I do not accept your resignation. You are doing a capable job. There is no plot. I shall slaughter the queen myself this very evening. You shall run Guilder for me after the war. Now get back on your feet. Yellen didn't know what to say. Thank you seemed so inadequate, but it was all he could come up with. Once the wedding is done, I shall send her to make ready, while I shall, with boots carefully procured in advance, make tracks leading from the wall to the bedroom, and returning then from the bedroom to the wall. Since you are in charge of law enforcement, I expect you will not take long to verify my fears that the prints could only be made by boots of Guelderian soldiers. Once we have that, we'll need a royal proclamation or two. My father can resign as being unfit for battle, and you, dear Yellen, will soon be living in Guilder Castle. Yellen knew a dismissal speech when he heard one. I leave with no thought in my heart but to serve you. Thank you, Humperdinck said, pleased, because, after all, loyalty was one thing you couldn't buy. And in that mood, he said to Yellen by the door, "And oh, if you see the albino, tell him he may stand in the back for my wedding. It's quite all right with me." "I will, Highness," Yellen said, adding, "but I don't know where my cousin is. I went looking for him less than an hour ago, and he was nowhere to be found." The prince understood important news when he heard it, because he wasn't the greatest hunter in the world for nothing, and even more, because if there was one thing you couldn't say about the albino, it was that he was always to be found. "My God, you don't suppose there is a plot, do you? It's a perfect time, the country celebrates. If Guilder were about to be 500 years old, I know I'd attack them." "I will rush to the gate and fight to the death if necessary," Yellen said. "Good man," the prince called after him. If there was an attack, it would come at the busiest time, during the wedding, so he would have to move that up. State affairs went slowly, but still he had authority. 6 o'clock was out. He would be married no later than 5:30, or know the reason why. At 5 o'clock, Max and Valerie were in the basement sipping coffee. "You better get right to bed," Valerie said. "You look all troubled. You can't stay up all night as if you were a pup." "I'm not tired," Max said, "but you're right about the other." "Tell Mama." Valerie crossed to him, stroked where his hair had been. "It's just I've been remembering about the pill. It was a beautiful pill, honey. Feel proud." "I think I messed up the amounts, though. Didn't they want an hour? When I doubled the recipe, I didn't do enough. I don't think it'll work over 40 minutes. Valerie moved into his lap. "Let's be honest with each other. Sure, you're a genius, but even a genius gets rusty. You were 3 years out of practice. 40 minutes will be plenty." "I suppose you're right. Anyway, what can we do about it? Down is down. The pressures you've been under, if it works at all, it'll be a miracle." Max had to agree with her. "A phantasmagoria," he nodded. The man in black was nearly stiff when Fezzik reached the wall. It was almost 5 o'clock, and Fezzik had been carrying the corpse the whole way from Miracle Max's, back street to back street, alleyway to alleyway. And it was one of the hardest things he had ever done. Not taxing, he wasn't even winded. But if the pill was just what it looked like, a chocolate lump, then he, Fezzik, was going to have a lifetime of bad dreams of bodies growing stiff between his fingers. When he at last was in the wall shadow, he said to Inigo, "What now?" "We've got to see if it's still safe. There might be a trap waiting." It was the same part of the wall that led shortly to the zoo, in the farthest corner of the castle grounds. But if the albino's body had been discovered, then who knew what was waiting for them? "Should I go up then?" Fezzik asked. "We'll both do it," Inigo replied. "Lean him against the wall and help me." Fezzik tilted the man in black so he was in no danger of falling, and waited while Inigo jumped onto his shoulders. Then Fezzik did the climbing. Any crack in the wall was enough for his fingers. The least imperfection was all he needed. He climbed quickly, familiar with it now, and after a moment Inigo was able to grab hold of the top and say, "All right, go on back down." So Fezzik returned to the man in black and waited. Inigo crept along the wall top in dead silence. For across he could see the castle entrance and the armed soldiers flanking it. And closer at hand was the zoo, and off in the deepest brush in the farthest corner of the wall he could make out the still body of the albino. Nothing had changed at all. They were at least, so far, safe. He gestured down to Fezzik, who scissored the man in black between his legs, began the arm climb noiselessly. When they were all together on the wall top, Inigo stretched out the dead man and then hurried along until he could get a better view of the main gate. The walk from the outer wall to the main castle gate was slanted slightly down. Not much of an incline, but a steady one. There must be, Inigo did a quick count, at least 100 men standing at the ready. And the time must be, he estimated closely, 5:05 now, perhaps close to 10. 50 minutes till the wedding. Inigo turned and then hurried back to Fezzik. "I think we should give him the pill," he said. "It must be around 45 minutes till the ceremony." "That means he's only got 15 minutes to escape with," Fezzik said. "I think we should wait until at least 5:30, half before, half after." "No," Inigo said. "We're going to stop the wedding before it happens. That's the best way, at least to my mind. Before they're all set, and the hustle and bustle beforehand. That's when we should strike." Fezzik had no further rebuttal. "Anyway," Inigo said, "we don't know how long it takes to swallow something like this." "I could never get it down myself, I know that." "We'll have to force feed him," Inigo said, unwrapping the chocolate-colored lump. "Like a stuffed goose. Put our hand around his neck and kind of push it down into whatever comes next." "I'm with you, Inigo," Fezzik said. "Just tell me what to do." Let's get him in a sitting position, I think, don't you? I always find it easier swallowing sitting up than lying down. We'll have to really work at it, Fezzik said. He's completely stiff by now. I don't think he'll bend easy at all. You can make him, Inigo said. I always have confidence in you, Fezzik. Thank you, Fezzik said. Just don't ever leave me alone. He pulled the corpse between them and tried to make him bend in half, but the man in black was so stiff, Fezzik really had to perspire to get him at the right angle. How long do you think we'll have to wait before we know if the miracle's on or not? Your guess is as good as mine, Inigo said. Get his mouth as wide open as you can and tilt his head back a little, and we'll just drop it in and see. Fezzik worked at the dead man's mouth a while, got it in the way, Inigo said, tilted the neck perfect the first time, and Inigo knelt directly above the cavity, dropped the pill down, and as it hit the throat, he heard, Couldn't beat me alone, you dastards! Well, I'll beat you each apart. I'll beat you both together. You're alive, Fezzik cried. The man in black sat immobile, like a ventriloquist dummy, just his mouth moving. That is perhaps the most childishly obvious remark I had ever come across. But what can you expect from a strangler? Why won't my arms move? You've been dead, Inigo explained. And we're not strangling you, Fezzik explained. We were just getting the pill down. The resurrection pill, Inigo explained. I bought it for Miracle Max, and it works for 60 minutes. What happens after 60 minutes? Do I die again? It wasn't 60 minutes. He just thought it was. Actually, it was 40. Only they had used up one already in conversation, so it was down to 39. We don't know. Probably you just collapse and need tending for a year or however long it takes to get your strength back. I wish I could remember what it was like when I was dead, the man in black said. I'd write it all down. I can make a fortune on a book like that. I can't move my legs either. That will come. It's supposed to. Max said the tongue and the brain were shoo-ins, and probably you'll be able to move, but slowly. The last thing I remember was dying, so why am I on this wall? Are we enemies? Have you got names? I'm the Dread Pirate Roberts, but you can call me Wesley. Fezzik. Inigo Montoya of Spain. Let me tell you what's been going on. He stopped and shook his head. No, he said, there's too much. It would take too long. Let me distill it for you. The wedding is at 6, which leaves us probably now something over half an hour to get in, steal the girl, and get out, but not before I kill Count Rugen. What are our liabilities? There is but one working castle gate, and it is guarded by perhaps 100 men. Wesley said, not as unhappy as he might have been ordinarily, because just then he began to be able to wiggle his toes. And our assets? Your brains, Fezzik's strength, my steel. Wesley stopped wiggling his toes. That's all? That's everything? That's it? Everything? The grand total? Inigo tried to explain. We've been operating under a terrible time pressure from the very beginning. Just yesterday morning, for example, I was a hopeless drunk, and Fezzik toiled for the brute squad. It's impossible, Wesley cried. I am Inigo Montoya, and I do not accept defeat. You will think of something. I have complete confidence in you. She's going to marry Humperdinck, and I'm helpless, Wesley said in blind despair. Lay me down again. Leave me alone. You're giving in too easily. We fought monsters to reach you. We risked everything because you have the brains to conquer problems. I have complete and absolute confidence that you... I want to die, Wesley whispered, and he closed his eyes. If I had a month to plan, maybe I might come up with something. But this, his head rocked from side to side. I'm sorry. Leave me. You just moved your own head, Fezzik said, doing his best to be cheery. Doesn't that up your spirits? My brains, your strength, and his steel against 100 troops? And you think a little head jiggle is supposed to make me happy? Why don't you just leave me to death? This is worse, lying here helpless while my true love marries my murderer. I just know once you're over your emotional outburst, you'll come up with... I mean, if we even had a wheelbarrow, that would be something, Wesley said. Where do we put that wheelbarrow the albino had? Inigo asked. Over by the albino, I think, Fezzik replied. Maybe we can get a wheelbarrow, Inigo said. Well, why didn't you list that among our assets in the first place, Wesley said, sitting up, staring out at the massed troops in the distance. You just sat up, Fezzik said, still trying to be cheery. Wesley continued to stare at the troops in the incline leading down toward them. He shook his head. What'd I give for a Holocaust clock, he said then. Holocaust cloak, he said then. There we can't help you, Inigo said. Will this do? Fezzik wondered, pulling out his Holocaust cloak. Where? Inigo began. Well, you were after frog dust, Fezzik answered. It fits so nicely, I just tucked it away and kept it. Wesley got to his feet then. All right, I need a sword eventually. Why? Inigo asked. You can barely lift one. True, Wesley agreed, but that is hardly common knowledge. Hear me now. There may be problems once we're inside. I'll say there may be problems, Inigo cut in. How do we stop the wedding? Once we do, how do we find the Count? Once I do, where will I find you again? Once we're together, how do we escape? Once we escape, Don't pester him with so many questions, Fezzik said. Take it easy. He's been dead. Right. Sorry, Inigo said. The man in black was moving very slowly now along the top of the wall, by himself. Fezzik and Inigo followed him through the darkness in the direction of the wheelbarrow. There was no denying the fact that there was certain excitement in the air. Buttercup, for her part, felt no excitement whatsoever. She had, in fact, never remembered such a wonderful feeling of calm. Her Wesley was coming. That was her world. Ever since the prince had dragged her to her room, she had spent the intervening hours thinking of ways to make Wesley happy. There was no way he could miss stopping the wedding. That was the only thought that could survive the trip across her conscious mind. So when she heard the wedding was to be moved up, she wasn't the least upset. Wesley was always prepared for contingencies, and if he could rescue her at 6, he could just as happily rescue her at 5:30. Actually, Prince Humperdinck got things going even faster than he had hoped. It was 5:23 when he and his bride-to-be were kneeling before the aged Archdeacon of Florin. It was 5:24 when the Archdeacon started to speak, and 5:25 when the screaming started outside the main gate. Buttercup only smiled softly. Here comes my Wesley now, was all she thought. It was not, in point of fact, her Wesley that was causing the commotion out front. Wesley was doing all he could to simply walk straight down the incline toward the main gate without help. Ahead of him, Inigo struggled with the heavy wheelbarrow. The reason for its weight was that Fezzik stood in it, arms wide, eyes blazing, voice booming in terrible rage. I am the dread pirate Roberts, and there will be no survivors. He said that over and over, his voice echoing and reverberating as his rage increased. He was standing there, gliding down through the darkness, quite an imposing figure, seeming all in all probably close to 10 feet tall, with voice to match. But even that was not the cause of screaming. Yellen, from his position by the gate, was reasonably upset by the roaring giant gliding down toward them through the darkness. Not that he doubted his 100 men could dispatch the giant. The upsetting thing was that, of course, the giant would be aware of that too, and logically there must somewhere in the dimness out there be any number of giant helpers. Other pirates, anything. Who could tell? Still, his men held together remarkably staunchly. It was only when the giant got halfway down the incline that he suddenly, happily, burst into flame and continued his trip saying, No survivors! No survivors! In a manner that could only indicate deadly sincerity. It was seeing him happily burning and advancing that started the brute squad to screaming. And once that happened, why, everyone panicked and ran.